psychologists. Thank you so much for being here. I'm your host, Mitchell R. Tucker, and today's guest is Mr. Ron Breland. Ron is I almost said convicted. Ron's not convicted that I know of. Ron is a fellow savage himself. He's a combat vet that served our country proudly. Now he's serving other combat vets and first responders in Arizona at War Figher Ranch. Ron, thank you so much for being here, sir.
Appreciate it, Mitch. Appreciate it. And make no mistake, I am convicted. I am convicted by the Lord, and that's the only reason I'm where I'm at right now.
All right, that's good. And we're going to get into that. So, Ron, I typically don't do a whole lot of research on the person before I interview them. I do enough to make sure that they're a good fit for us here, but I kind of like to learn about you firsthand right here, because I feel like it makes the interview go smoother, and I can learn about you as they learn about you. But I did see that you had a pretty rough childhood growing up. Is that right?
Some would say so. When it's your own story, it just is what it is. It doesn't seem like anything monumental or, my daughter looks at me and says, "You have a Forrest Gump life. You just have all these weird things that just happen to have happened, or places in history you happen to have been, or how with one person." I'm like, well, that's what God needed me.
Yeah.
And that's really the end of the story. That's really all that matters, because it's certain it may be the end of the story, but it's certainly not the beginning. I was born in Louisiana in 1970, the son of a Vietnam veteran, Marine police officer, and a Democratic hippie protester mother. So,
oh wow, what a mixture.
It was a pretty eclectic mix in my house. My mother's brother, Steve, actually went to Vietnam with the Marines, and he brought my dad home. Now, having been in the service, I love my guys. I love them to death. I'd lay it all down for them, but I'm not quite so sure I'd bring them home to meet my baby sister. Right. And that's what my uncle did. And here's something that can only happen in the vet community. My mother was engaged at 19 years old, fresh out of high school in Atlantic City. And her brother brings this Marine home. So, of course, they're all hanging out at the house, staying at the house. Turns out she falls in love with this Marine, ditches the engagement, marries this Marine, my dad. 12 years later, they're divorced. Now, fast forward 30 years, my father passes away about 10 years ago. About 3 years later, my mother moves back to New Jersey to stay with her brother, Marine Vietnam vet. And it turns out he's hanging out with this band. And one of the guitar players in the band is the guy she was engaged to in high school.
Oh, wow.
Now they are happily married, beautiful couple. They're in their 70s, and man, they deserve to be happy. You know what I mean? I mean, a lot of people might not see that as a victory story for them, but you take yourself out of it. I just want my mother to be happy.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? Oh. And she deserves that. After 2 really rough marriages, she found a guy who really, really take care of her. And I had to swallow a pride pill there, because he's a sailor. So I'm gonna have to give him a bye on that one.
Yeah, we won't hold that against him. Oh, that's funny.
But yeah, my dad was a cop. He was involved in a lot of mafia cases. And in the 70s, there were no cell phones or video cameras. People got away with murder, literally. And during my parents' separation, I was visiting my dad one weekend, and we went for this walk and down to the beach. It was very close. And turns out we found a body in a trunk. And it was a part of a mafia case, and it was part of back then, it was the Nicky Scarfo Gambino crime family out of New York and Philadelphia and Atlantic City, and just running all these racketeering schemes and stuff. And it was weird as a kid, because you're going to school with all your dad's cop buddies' kids, but you're also going to school with all these mobsters' kids. And on the playground, it didn't matter. Every day at recess. I was Terry Bradshaw. We're playing, steady quarterback in a game of football on the playground, and it didn't matter who was who.
Yeah.
We're just trying to be kids, and things did get rough there for a while. My best friend and I were chased down the street, down the beach rather, by it was almost comical, really. It sounds worse than I feel like it really was. But then again, as a kid, I probably didn't digest the gravity of the situation.
Mm.
But here we are, two kids, take off our shoes, running barefoot on the beach, and we're like Briar Rabbit. We're gone like a bullet. And there's two guys in pinstripe suits trying to take off their low quarters, and I'm like, yeah, they're never going to catch us. It's never going to happen. So, but when you're young, you don't think, but I can't outrun a bullet. You're not thinking that way.
Yeah.
And then my mother got into a different marriage. A guy who was he was a Kenyan. He was a British-born citizen, born in Kenya, before the Mau Mau Rebellion, before Kenya got their independence. So this guy got to see a piece of the world history in a different light. Very much a racial issue at that point in the 60s. And Kenya was just trying to get their independence too. It wasn't just a race thing. It was a national pride thing. And they were trying to break away from British rule. I think we all know what that's like. But he became very abusive, and he got into this punishment process called caning, which is something that he suffered from in boarding school. And in the process of caning, they take a bamboo cane, and it's exactly what it sounds like. They beat your tail with it, and they try to line up the hash marks. That's apparently the goal of this process. It's pretty sick. I got kicked out when I was 16, and my mother was away, of course, because the guy wasn't brave enough to do it while she was around. And for years I had issue after issue with that. But as I got older, I learned that my mother was not in a position to really so much help me directly. So the best thing I think she thought she could do was release me and let me go out and fend for my own. I was smart enough. I left the house with the clothes on my back and a fishing rod, Mitchell. I was prepared to, and I did. I fished for my food. Thank God I lived in South Florida, so the weather wasn't horrible and the fish were aplenty. So it's not like I starved or anything, but I did all this while finishing high school.
And you still finished.
I slept on the bleachers at my high school until an old janitor brought me in. This is again the early 80s. Cameras weren't in schools, thank God, because he probably would have gone to jail and I would have gone to the system or something. But he was the kindest old man. I mean, this guy walked straight out of a John Cougar Mellencamp video, like Pink Houses or something. And he's like, you don't need to sleep on the bleachers. And we had these new locker rooms being built in front of the old locker rooms. So they're behind them and they were all like plywooded off. And he let me sleep. I had the whole old locker room to myself, showers, bathrooms, locker. I had everything. And nobody knew I was there. So during the day, I would go to school. And after school, I'd just hang out outside till my friends cleared out. And then I'd head back to my temporary abode. And that would never fly in today's society. You know that.
Yeah, you're not kidding.
But
that's impressive, though. You stayed there and finished.
Well, I made the best of it. I finished up high school in Fort Lauderdale because I was homeless at this point, and it couldn't last forever that way. So I went to a place called Covenant House. A friend of mine, her dad actually ran that place in Fort Lauderdale, and it was a Catholic charities place. And we didn't learn a lot about God, but I learned a lot about life. I met an 11-year-old prostitute. I met a 16-year-old mother of triplets. I mean, so many people just broken, and the numbers were unfathomable. And as a kid, you're seeing this and you're like, I'm only getting older. What are we getting into here? I don't know how to fix all this stuff. This is a broken world we're in here. And I mean, you didn't have to tell us that because we were all street kids. It was a place for runaways and throwaways. And my stepfather in a drunken rage would have had you believe I was a runaway, but when in fact, if my rod wasn't on the side of the house, if I hadn't been lazy and left it outside the night before, I wouldn't have had that going out the door. So, I mean, it was a pretty hasty exit after a pretty big fight. And, I left my grandmother, my mother, my little brother behind there, and it tore at me for a while. But my little brother, I mean, he didn't hold anything against me. I was the object of this guy's disdain. So when I left, things kind of cooled off, dramatically. So my little brother, I'll always give him crap because he's my little brother. But he's, when I was in jump school in 97, I called him and I said, bro, I can fly. I said, this is beyond, this is everything I ever had hoped it would be. And I'd always dreamed of jumping out of planes. And I called him. He was at MacDill Air Force Base as an Air Force medic, wearing chloroforms every day, and his wife's in the hospital. And here, we're out, ground pounding with paratroopers and stuff. And he got bit by the bug, and he eventually went to jump school, joined special operations, and is now a retired operator out of a clandestine unit. So I might talk shit about my medical, my medic little brother wearing his chloroforms and his whites, but he wound up at the top of that pile. He did really well.
That's awesome. Happy to hear that.
So
at what age did you go into the military?
I actually went in at 19 because I started college first. I wanted to try a little bit of college. I wound up getting into a program. I got into a scholarship, and I was an English major. I was an editor of the college paper, and I was going to be the journalist that was going to change the world.
Yeah.
Back then, I was like, I'm going to be a voice for the voiceless because I've been that, and no more, just no more, not on my watch. And God gave me a big mouth and a loud voice, and he put me in a place where I could call cadence and jump out of planes and blow things up for a living. So, I mean, it was a pretty good deal, really. It really matched my personality up with my mission. And I could not have been happier. One of the highlights of my time in the military is the day I got to Fort Campbell, Kentucky. It was my first duty assignment out of AIT. I'm fresh off of leave, haven't run in 2 weeks, eating everything in sight because I'm out of AIT and I finally got a paycheck. It's cool when you can feed yourself. It really is. And when you come from a place where that wasn't possible, you really feel like you're moving on up in the world. You really do. I remember when I was a kid, the only time I said, when I grew up, I just want to get to a place where I can eat a McDonald's hamburger anytime I want.
That's a heck of a goal, brother.
Baby steps, man.
That's right.
but from that perspective, that was an enormous goal.
Yeah, absolutely.
At the time, from being homeless, and now, life's a little better than that, which is good.
Yeah.
But I got to Fort Campbell and I saw that sign that said Rendezvous with Destiny. And man, it just reached into my chest and grabbed a hold of my heart. And I'm like,
what did it say again?
Rendezvous with Destiny.
Oh, okay.
The 101st Airborne motto. And I could not have bit hook, line, and sinker more. And from there, it wasn't maybe a year. I was at Fort Campbell at the fire station. I was a firefighter. I mean, life was good in the Army fire station. Don't get me wrong. We got brown recliners, a full industrial kitchen. I mean, if you got to be on duty, I mean, you may as well. And you get to ride fire trucks. And I mean, hello, it's the ultimate. So I volunteered for the mission in Somalia because I was told that we needed drivers. I'm like, God, I can drive a fire engine. I can drive a Humvee. Let's give it a shot. So I called staff dude. I told my squad leader, this is my only E4 Mafia story of my career, the only one. And it turned out to be a double-edged sword. And I'll tell you what. I told my squad leader, who's an E5, sitting there, kicked back in the recliner, watching a movie at the fire station one night. I said, hey, I think I'm going to call Sergeant Major and volunteer to go to Africa. He goes, yeah, you go ahead and do that. And I was like, okay. So I ran off to the alarm room, called battalion. Battalion patches me through to the Sergeant Major at home.
Wow. Now,
Specialist Breland is thinking, maybe I'm in a little bit deeper into the pool than I thought I was. Just that one factor alone.
Yeah.
And Sergeant Major was cool. Said, I'll get with you first thing in the morning. And you don't know these things when you're a Joe. You don't know about strength management and Blue 4 and all. You don't know about any of that stuff. So by doing that, I took my deployable firefighting team offline because we were only a team of 6 men in one fire truck. And that's it. You hop on a C-130 and you go. Rangers do an airfield seizure. You take the fire service and we can start landing aircraft in there. That's how it operates. Well, that couldn't happen. And there were only 7 teams at the time in the Army, 42 firefighters in the whole Army that were deployable. And I was one of them. And I was now here away from my team, leaving my team basically offline as far as DA understood at home. The 91st Engineer Detachment out of Fort Rucker, and I'll never not take my hat off for those guys. Those are the guys at Mogadishu Airfield. And I have to give a special shout out here to a guy you may not know. His name is John Pouch. And he was a firefighter I served with in the Army, and he was the medic. He was the team medic for the 91st Engineers at Mogadishu Airfield in 93. And as horrific and tragic as it was that we lost those 18 guys, I can categorically say that John Pouch is the reason, or at the very least, one of the very few reasons that we only had 18 fatalities that day.
Wow.
And I know that that's something that some people will probably never know or never look at, but as bad as it was, I know for a fact it could have been worse.
Wow. Do you still have communication with him?
Yeah, I talked to him last week. Yeah, we sent him some of our bracelets here that we'd use for our ministry. It's a conversation starter. It's a foot in the door.
Yeah, and I want to get into that next. So where does War Figher Ranch, where does that come into play?
Well, War Figher Ranch is actually, it's Helen's nonprofit. I'm really the face man because I'm the vet. I'm the first responder, so I'm the guy who can actually talk to these people. It's not that she can't talk to them, but I can get further in 3 minutes than she can in 3 hours.
Yeah.
Because we're just at that level. So the cool part is she came at this with this vision, and she does this thing where she gets up in the middle of the night and she'll say, get me a notebook. And it's like, I've learned to just be obedient. Now we just keep a notebook by the bedroom. And she just wrote down this detailed plan for War Figher Ranch and what it's going to look like and what it's going to do. And the program that we're going to run at War Figher Ranch when we eventually have the ranch is called camouflage. And the premise behind camouflage is that you have to peel off the layers to deal with what's underneath. And we are experts at applying and maintaining that camouflage in any and all environments. We are like chameleons that way. And while that served us to a life-saving purpose at one point, it does hold a certain value now in this community, because you have to be ready. Ministry is no joke. It's not, it's a lonely business. I'll tell you that. It's not like people call you up and say, have a nice day. People call you just like they call the fire station. People don't call 911 to say, have a nice day. They call you when their world's falling apart.
Yeah.
They call you when they're like, I don't know what I need, but God help me. I need help. And you just do. So we found that through many different processes and programs that I've gone through in the past and whatnot, we found out that a lot of these temporary deals are what we like to call Band-Aid programs. You go somewhere for a weekend, you come back and you're on this camp high and you're like, hey, honey, I'm home. And she's like, that's great. You were an ass on Friday. That's all I remember. And, the kids are still scared. They don't want to talk to you. And I'm like, but I had such a great weekend. I learned so much. And they're like, yeah, that's nice. What's it doing for me? And that's realistically, that's a fair question. So Helen she comes up with War Figher Ranch. She says God gave it to her. And she said, there's no way I can do this. I'm not a businesswoman. I said, Helen, you're a combat wife. You're a devout follower of Christ. You're not, that's the other thing about the ranch. We don't do religion here. One of my favorite things, Mitch, is when I meet somebody and they say, oh man, I hate religion. I'm like, oh yeah, man, me too. And they're like, how are you a chaplain? How does that work? And I'm like, it's not about religion. It's about relationship.
Yeah, I agree.
That's what God wants with us.
Yeah.
He wants relationship. If he just wanted a bunch of minions who would follow the rules, we would all just be a bunch of drones running around out here, like a bunch of robotic ants just going through the motions. That's not what he wants. That's certainly not what we want. Right. Clearly we're obviously pretty independent creatures. That would be very unfulfilling for us. So, I get a lot of the standard questions, what do you guys deal with suicide? Do you hand out money? Do you do this? Do you do that? Let me tell you exactly what kind of ministry we are. We're not in a place to cut checks. So I can't just give money away or anything, because most of the ranch right now is being funded by my retirement, and I'm totally okay with that. But the kind of money we're going to need to get the ranch open and established is first 3 years build and operational cost $4.9 million. So that's if we have to build it. If it's like a ready ranch, somebody wants to say, they want a tax break, so they donate the property or whatever. Okay, cool. We can do that too. But there's so many organizations out there that do things like equine support and things of that nature. So we're not going to do that. We're going to bring those people in and join the team, because I don't have every tool that Mitch has. Mitch doesn't have every tool that Ron has, but together we're unstoppable, because once you combine those forces, and the way we're going to work it, this is Helen's vision of a piece of the ranch. She wants to have this big barn, like beautiful enough to where you could get married in it, But we would hold our gatherings there, hold our chapel there, hold our meetings there. And then there would be office spaces and bunk space in the upper level for organizations to come in for their portion of the program. Say the equine portion is only 4 days. Okay, park your trailer and we'll corral the horses. You're bunking up here. Chow's at 6. Let's go to work. And it's just ready. So we want to have that malleable environment where we can fit in all these things, but it's not going to be just anybody. What we're dealing with is someone's salvation, someone's life after life. And there's really nothing more important than that. So when we come at this approach, Mitch, what we see is people don't really understand. They don't understand. Well, you would have to really love somebody to care enough about them to want to drive these issues, and drive through these issues walk beside them in their pain and their torment and their suffering. But you know what, Mitch? Somebody did it for me. Somebody did it for me when I had a 357 tickle in the back of my throat.
Wow.
When I was suicidal, I had the big online Facebook meltdown, and it was just this tragic, ugly, horrible public thing. And it was what it was. But you know what got me the most about that day?
What's that?
There was one veteran, and I honestly, God's honest truth, I don't even remember his name. But he said, "Why don't you just go ahead and do it? Instead of putting us through all this BS, why don't you just go ahead and do it?"
Wow.
And that was like a slap in the face. That was like a wake-up call. That was like, wow, people have limits, and you have clearly reached the end of this guy's limits. And I mean, it was bad. I mean, no other way to look at it. It was rough, but I didn't ever go through anything that I didn't voluntarily put myself through.
Yeah.
Fact.
So if people believe in your cause and they want to support you, how can people support War Figher Ranch?
Well, you can go to warfighterranch.org. Our website, you can read everything about the ranch there, current events, upcoming events. Last year, we had our first public event, Warfighter Palooza. It was in between lockdowns. I mean, God made sure we walked between the raindrops and didn't get wet, Mitch. I'm telling you, because it was like lockdown, and we had the date locked in with the city. They sold us the wrong permit by mistake, and they charged us $350 instead of $3,500. This was like, we were all in, man. This had to happen. And God made it to where the mandates were lifted. We had the event. I gave my testimony for the first time ever in public. And what's ironic about my testimony, it was 30 years to the day that I stepped in, that I went into the Army's door for the first time.
Oh, wow. What a coincidence, right?
There are none, brother. There are none. There are no such thing. It was meant to be that way. I really do believe that.
Cool. So fast forward into today's date. What do you think about the direction of our country now? What most concerns you?
What most concerns me today? Well, there's a big list.
Right.
There is a big list. If you're an American, if you're not an American and you're listening to this in some other country, I cannot even imagine how big your list must be, because we are that shining city on the hill. We are that world's last hope of true freedom. And I just, I've read the end of the book, Mitch. Yeah. I've read the end of the book, and I know how it ends. It doesn't mean it's going to get a lot better between now and then. But what concerns me most about the state of the world today is that people, I think they really need to return to God. They really need to know that Jesus is the only way to heaven. It's the only way through this, past this, out of this. And my gosh, it's been almost 250 years. Why don't we give it a shot, like an honest, earnest shot, and go back to those? Now, I'm a realist. I know that our country's not going to go back to 1960s, moral, social values, because that was boring. Well, look what not boring got us.
Yeah.
So what we try to do now until, because, that's getting the ranch open, dealing with all these issues. Our phone calls, emails, messages spiked at the fall of Afghanistan. They're still coming in. I got guys asking me every day, Ron, what was it worth it? My buddy died. I lost my leg. What was it worth it? Because of the way our country handled it, or I should say mishandled it, was very public and very humiliating for us. And I think it really dug deep into a not so old wound in the veteran community, that being the global war on terrorism. And I'm not a warmonger. I'm not some kind of hippie peacenik. I believe in fighting for what you believe in, fighting for the righteous. Absolutely. God was all for that.
Yeah.
He was all for that. But I know that in the position that we're in right now, as just everyday Americans, is, Americans are starting to realize the power that they have. They're reading. You know what the Trump administration did?
What's that?
That Trump's 4 years in the White House. That period of time, and I'm not going to say Trump now, and I am a Trump fan, but I'm actually an independent because I'm in ministry. So I go with who I think is going to go more closely aligned with God's values. That's all I can do. Mm-hmm. So I refuse to align to a political party, but what it did was it opened our eyes. It made people read the Constitution. It made people read the amendments. It made people read the laws, because all the things that people gripe about, well, you can gripe about a law all you want, but if you don't do anything to change it, you're going to do nothing but be unhappy because it's not going to change. And and people gripe about the level of freedom that we have here. Graham Allen posted a video yesterday of people protesting not having a mask mandate. So they're using their freedom to literally protest freedom. And it just boggles the mind.
Yeah.
And I see it's usually the same demographic of people. And that's, I want to say 18 to 30 or so, the Antifa crowd, the BLM crowd, the youth full of torment and angst because I hate my dad, so I'm going to go burn a city down. No, that doesn't fly in America. It really doesn't. Sadly, it has. But that brings me to our paracord right there, of which we will be sending you one, because we do it with every podcaster and every organization we meet.
Oh, thank you.
We send you a one-of-a-kind piece that tells part of your story, and it allows us an artistic medium to make a one-of-a-kind thing, and it does. It takes hundreds of hours to make these charms and dry them and reshape them with the Dremel and recoat them, and and then of course the weight. So it takes forever. But when you present somebody with one of these and you tell them, this is a one of a kind, there are no others like it on the planet. And I made it before I knew you. I made it with the thought of you, because something told me to make it this size, this color, whatever. I mean, Mitch, I don't know what your wrist size is, but I know damn well it's going to fit when it gets there. You know why? Because God can't be wrong 20,000 times.
Yeah.
And I can't be right that many times.
I like it. Yeah.
Reality. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I've learned to trust the guidance that I'm given. Hey, Ron, why are you making a piece for the security forces in the Air Force today? You're not even Air Force. I don't know. I just feel like making it. And then sure enough, I meet a guy, boom, there it is. And it's like, yeah, it's been validated literally thousands of times. So we started to use it as a fundraiser, but you're never going to build a ranch selling paracord bracelets.
Yeah.
But this year I made them for the Phoenix Mercury, the WNBA team. We got Medal of Honor recipients. Melania's got one. I sent it to the president, but I'm told that she confiscated it, so we know who's really in charge in that house. I act like I don't know what I'm talking about. Yeah, we know who's in charge in this house too. Whatever. I just can't say it too loud because she might hear me.
That's right.
No, I have no complaints, man. I have a beautiful, amazing, intelligent Proverbs 31 woman, and she is, at the risk of hanging a label on her, because she is one who will not be labeled. She's perfect. She is, I mean, I can Angela, Maya Angelou wrote a piece once, and it said something to the effect of, a man should have to look so deeply through a woman. When a man looks at a woman, he should have to look so thoroughly through God to see her. And I remember reading that when I was younger. And ironically, I remember thinking that when I met Helen. And I was like, where's that coming from? Because that is not what I was thinking when I saw her in the club. Okay. That is not where I was going. I was a paratrooper. I was, young and I'm just a helpless man. What can I say, man? But I tell her that to this day. I was helpless against your powers. I still am. So
That's awesome. Well,
that's where it's at.
That's it. All right, Ron. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to jump on here. Is there anything closing statement you want to make, or anything you would like to share before we get off here?
Yeah, Mitch, I really do appreciate you giving me the time. I really do. And helping us get the word out. We're praying for the Warfighter Nation, the peaceful savage nation, of course, which is now part of our family. And we just want to love everybody, man. Our community is just one of the most special, dynamic demographics in history. And I really do believe that God is using the Warfighter Nation. I believe he's setting us up to do some pretty amazing things with helping to restore our nation. I really do believe that. And if you wouldn't mind terribly giving me a moment, I'd like to pray for the Warfighter Nation while we have the chance.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Dear Lord, thank you for so much for this day and this opportunity with my brother in Christ, Mitchell, and thank you for the Peaceful Savage Nation and all of his work to join people together and join hearts and join minds and bring these people together to do more, infinitely more than we could do on our own, Lord. And we ask this in your holy name, in Jesus' mighty name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you so much, brother. This has been such a great start to my Red Friday, man. It really has.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your time, and we'll stay in contact.
Absolutely, brother. We'll be praying for you, and we'll see you soon.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
God bless.